The contract sat on Bryson Vale's mahogany desk like a loaded gun, its pages thick with numbers that made my stomach turn. My name was already typed at the bottom, waiting for my signature to seal my fate. "Sign it, Elara," Bryson said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. "Or your career ends here." I stared at the document. Revenue smoothing, they called it in business school. Fraud, the federal government called it. The contract would make me personally responsible for shifting millions between quarters to hide our actual losses. My hands started shaking. "This isn't legal," I whispered. Bryson stood and walked to his office door. The soft click of the lock made my blood run cold. He turned back to me, his smile gone, replaced by something hard and dangerous. "Legal is whatever the board doesn't ask questions about," he said. "You're the financial analyst. You sign. You take responsibility. Or I make sure everyone believes you're the one who orchestrated this entire scheme." My phone sat in my blazer pocket. I slid my hand inside, found the record button and pressed it. The tiny vibration against my palm was the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. Bryson leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watching me like a predator watching wounded prey. "I've been very patient with you, Elara. I promoted you. I gave you opportunities. And this is how you repay me." With hesitation, Bryson pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the first. He dropped it on the desk between us with a heavy thud that made me flinch. "Let me explain this very carefully," he said, opening the folder. "These are all the transactions we need to reallocate. Quarters where we overspent get balanced by quarters where we underreported. Simple accounting adjustments." "That's not what these are," I said, my voice barely steady. "These are fake vendor invoices. Shell company payments. This is embezzlement dressed up in spreadsheets." His jaw tightened. "Don't use words you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, finding some courage I didn't know I had. "You want me to sign a document that makes me legally responsible for financial crimes. If the SEC investigates, my name is on everything. Not yours." Bryson's face darkened. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something bitter, maybe rage. "You think you're clever. You think you understand how this works. I understand I'm not signing that contract." The silence that followed was suffocating. Bryson stared at me for what felt like hours, then leaned down until his face was inches from mine. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than shouting. "Then I'll destroy you first." My legs barely carried me out of Bryson's office. I pushed through the door, ignoring his secretary's curious glance, and headed straight for the emergency stairwell. The cold concrete walls felt safe compared to that locked office. I leaned against the railing, my whole body shaking, and pulled out my phone. My hands trembled so badly it took 3 tries to stop the recording. 15 minutes and 42 seconds. I played it back, adjusting the volume. Bryson's voice came through crystal clear. "Sign it, Elara, or your career ends here." Then my voice, small and frightened. "This isn't legal." His response, cold and calculated. "Then I'll destroy you first." I had him. Evidence of coercion, of threats, of him admitting the contract was questionable. This recording was my only weapon, my only protection against whatever came next. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. An email notification. The sender, Bryson Vale. Subject line: "Mandatory meeting. Bring updated reports." I opened it with shaking fingers. The email was brief, professional, completely different from the man who just threatened me. But attached was a PDF file that made my blood freeze. It was the contract. The same fraudulent contract from his office. Except this version had my signature at the bottom. A perfect digital copy of my e-signature, the one the company used for approved documents. He'd forged it. I stormed into HR first thing the next morning, the forged contract printed and clutched in my hand. Patricia from Human Resources looked up from her computer, her expression shifting from pleasant to guarded the moment she saw my face. Patricia, someone forged my signature, I said, sliding the document across her desk. This contract that supposedly has my approval. I never signed it. I never even agreed to the terms. Patricia picked up the paper, studied it for maybe 5 seconds, then set it down. Ilara, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. These systems sometimes auto-populate signatures for efficiency. Auto-populate. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Patricia, this is a legal document that makes me personally liable for financial decisions I didn't make. Someone forged my signature to cover fraud. She straightened the papers on her desk, not meeting my eyes. I spoke with Mr. Vale this morning. He already clarified the misunderstanding. You were copied on the email chains where these terms were discussed. Your signature was added as a formality. I never received those emails. And this isn't a formality, it's forgery. I'll make a note of your concerns, Patricia said, her tone suggesting she'd do no such thing. She was protecting him. They all were. As I left her office, Kent from accounting caught my arm in the hallway. He glanced around nervously before leaning close. You need to watch your back, he whispered. They're building a case against you. The next morning everything fell apart. I opened my email to find 17 messages from department heads, all asking about discrepancies in my financial reports. My stomach dropped as I clicked through them. Someone had edited every major report I'd filed in the last 3 months. Numbers were wrong by millions of dollars. Calculations that I'd triple-checked now showed massive errors. It looked like I'd been incompetent for months, maybe intentionally cooking the books. At 10 o'clock, Bryson called an executive meeting. I walked into the conference room to find every senior manager already seated, their faces grave. Bryson stood at the head of the table, my reports projected on the screen behind him. Ilara, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. Can you explain these calculation errors? The board has some serious questions about the accuracy of your work. I stood there, frozen, as he systematically dismantled my professional reputation in front of everyone. He pointed out every mistake, asked pointed questions I couldn't answer without access to my original files, and made it clear that either I was incompetent or deliberately manipulating numbers. When the meeting ended, I rushed back to my desk and pulled up the access logs for my reports. My heart hammered as I scrolled through the timestamps. There it was. Someone had accessed my files using my login credentials at 2:17 a.m. last Tuesday. I'd been home, asleep, nowhere near my computer. Someone had my password. Tarek from IT showed up at my desk that afternoon, glancing around like he was doing something forbidden. We'd worked together on a few projects, and he'd always been friendly, quiet, the kind of guy who kept his head down and did his job well. Ilara, he said quietly. Can we talk? Somewhere private. We ended up in the small break room on the second floor, the one nobody used because the coffee maker had been broken for months. Tarek pulled out his tablet and opened a security monitoring app. The system flagged unusual activity on your account, he explained, his voice barely above a whisper. Multiple logins from locations you shouldn't have been. File modifications during off hours. I wasn't supposed to notice, but I built some of these monitoring protocols myself. Can you trace where the access came from? Tarek nodded, swiping through screens of data that looked like hieroglyphics to me. Every login has an IP address. Your legitimate logins come from your office workstation and your laptop. But these other ones, he tapped a highlighted entry. They're coming from a different location. Where? He zoomed in on a network map, following the digital trail through the company's infrastructure. The path led through firewalls, past security checkpoints, into a restricted section of the network. Executive floor, Tarek said. Specifically, an IP address assigned to the CEO's private office. Bryson's been accessing your files directly, using admin privileges to bypass normal security. He's framing me, I whispered. He's building evidence that I'm the one committing fraud. Tarek nodded grimly. And he's doing it from his own computer, which means he thinks he's untouchable. Walking through the office became a nightmare. Every hallway felt like a trap, every corner a potential ambush. But the worst part was the cameras. I first noticed it on Wednesday morning. I was walking to the printer when I saw the security camera mounted on the wall physically swivel to follow my movement. Not the normal slow pan these cameras did, but a deliberate turn, tracking me like a spotlight. I tested it again that afternoon. Walked from my desk to the bathroom watching the cameras. Each one turned as I passed, following my exact path. Someone was actively monitoring me in real time. That night I started documenting everything. Every conversation, every email, every strange occurrence. I took photos of the cameras tracking me, recorded timestamps, built a detailed log of all the harassment and surveillance. If Bryson wanted to play dirty, I'd have evidence of every move he made. Thursday morning, a calendar invite appeared in my inbox. No description, no agenda, just a meeting title that made my hands go cold. Performance review. Grounds for termination. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 9. Just me, Bryson, and Patricia from HR. I had less than 24 hours to prepare for what was clearly going to be my execution. I forwarded the invite to my personal email, along with every piece of evidence I'd collected. Then I did something I should have done days ago. I called my college roommate who'd become a corporate attorney. "Ilara," she said after I explained everything, "you need to record that meeting. Whatever happens, you need evidence." The performance review room was small and windowless, designed to make you feel trapped. Bryson sat at the head of the table, Patricia to his right with a laptop open in front of her. A stack of papers sat between them, my supposed errors. "Thank you for coming, Ilara," Bryson said, his voice professionally concerned. "We need to discuss some serious issues regarding your work performance and these troubling discrepancies in your reports." He slid a document across the table. It was a written warning already drafted, detailing months of alleged negligence and errors. My fabricated mistakes, printed in official company letterhead. "As you can see," Bryson continued, "we've documented a pattern of calculation errors, missed deadlines, and failure to follow proper financial protocols. We need to hear your explanation before we proceed with disciplinary action." He wanted me to panic, to defend myself, to make excuses, to verbally take responsibility for mistakes I hadn't made. Every word I said would be used against me later. So I said nothing. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, phone recording everything from my blazer pocket, and stayed completely silent. Bryson's professional mask slipped slightly. "Ilara, this is your opportunity to explain. If you can't account for these errors." "I have nothing to say," I interrupted quietly. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Bryson's jaw tightened. He'd expected fear, expected weakness, expected me to crumble. Instead he got silence. He leaned back, a cold smile spreading across his face. "If you won't speak, I'll make the board speak for you." That weekend, I became a detective investigating my own case. I spread everything across my dining room table. Printed emails, access logs, the forged contract, my recordings, everything. I started building a timeline. Not just of the last 2 weeks but going back months. When had Bryson's behavior changed? When had these shell companies first appeared in our vendor database? When did the revenue smoothing really begin? Patterns emerged. 3 months ago, a new vendor called Cascade Holdings had been added to our approved supplier list. They'd received 6 payments totaling $4 million. I'd never heard of them. 2 months ago, another company, Pinnacle Consulting, received $3 million for services never rendered. The list went on. Every fraudulent transaction had something in common. They'd been approved by Bryson and countersigned by someone in finance. But the finance signatures were always from analysts who'd since left the company or been transferred. People who couldn't contradict the paperwork. Bryson had been doing this for at least 6 months, probably longer. And every time someone got close to discovering it, they either quit, got moved, or got fired. I was just the latest in a long line of potential scapegoats. Monday morning, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Jalen from internal audit standing in the hallway, looking nervous. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the door. "Now." Jalen had been with the company for 8 years, a quiet guy in his 40s who lived for spreadsheets and compliance reports. We'd worked together occasionally, but never closely. Now he sat on my couch, clutching a leather portfolio, looking like a man who'd been carrying a terrible secret for too long. "I've been tracking irregularities for months," he said, opening the portfolio. "Payments to vendors that don't exist, inventory adjustments that don't make sense, revenue recognition that violates every accounting standard. Every time I flag something, every time I file a report, it disappears." "What do you mean, disappears?" "I submit findings to the audit committee. They acknowledge receipt. Then nothing. No follow-up, no investigation, no questions. It's like the reports vanish into a black hole. Someone high up is burying everything I find." He spread papers across my coffee table. I recognized some of the same shell companies I'd identified. Cascade Holdings, Pinnacle Consulting, others I hadn't seen yet. "I started keeping copies," Jalen continued. "Everything I found, every report they made disappear, every suspicious transaction. I've been documenting this for 7 months, waiting for someone else to notice, someone who could actually do something about it." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "The SEC. Because I don't have proof of who's behind it. Every trail leads to different signatures, different approvals, different departments. The whole thing is designed to be impossible to trace." He looked up at me. "Until last week, when you rejected that contract. That's when all roads started leading to one person." He pulled out one more document, this one marked with red tabs. "All roads lead to Bryson." The documents Jalen gave me were devastating. He'd built a complete financial forensics file. Spreadsheets highlighting the fraudulent transactions, copies of fake invoices, wire transfer confirmations to shell company accounts, even corporate registration documents showing Bryson's college roommate as the owner of 3 different vendor companies. "This is enough to send him to prison," I said, flipping through page after page of evidence. "Almost," Jalen corrected. "There's one piece missing. The contract he tried to make you sign. That's the linchpin. Without it, expensive lawyers could argue he was just approving legitimate business expenses. But that contract, that's explicit intent to commit fraud, and it names you as the person accepting responsibility. He forged my signature on it, which makes it worse for him, not you. Forgery plus fraud plus coercion. That's a federal prosecutor's dream case." Jalen tapped the contract. "But I need the original, the one he tried to force you to sign. Do you have it?" I shook my head. "Just the forged version he emailed me." "Then we need to get the original from his office. It's the only copy that doesn't have your forged signature. It's the proof that he created 2 versions, one to coerce you, one to frame you." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Tariq's name flashed on the screen. Answered. "Ilara." His voice was tight with panic. He wiped the servers. "Everything's gone. All the logs, all the backups, every piece of digital evidence showing him accessing your files. He initiated a complete data purge an hour ago." My stomach dropped. "Can you recover it?" Then Tariq said something that made me smile. "Good thing I built hidden mirrors of everything." Tariq arrived at my apartment within an hour, carrying a small external hard drive that contained enough evidence to destroy Bryson's life. We spent the evening reconstructing everything: the deleted access logs, the modified files, the original versions of my reports before they'd been sabotaged. "Why did you back up everything?" asked. Tariq shrugged. "I've worked in corporate IT for 12 years. I've seen too many executives try to erase their mistakes. When Bryson started asking me to delete security footage and modify system logs 6 months ago, I knew something was wrong. So I started keeping copies of everything before it disappeared. We built a timeline that was impossible to dispute. Bryson's access to my files at 2:17 a.m., correlating exactly with when my reports were modified. His IP address appearing in system logs at times he claimed to be out of office. His personal email forwarding documents to shell company addresses. But as we worked, something else became clear. The forged contract wasn't just about framing me for recent fraud. It was designed to tie me to years of embezzlement. Every suspicious transaction, every shell company payment, every fake vendor invoice. Signing that contract would have made me legally responsible for all of it. He was going to use you as the scapegoat for everything, Jalen said, studying the timeline. The moment you signed, you became the mastermind behind a multi-year embezzlement scheme. He'd walk away clean while you faced federal charges. A piece of paper slid under my apartment door, the sound making all three of us jump. Tariq grabbed it, unfolded it. 5 words in block letters. Stop digging or you'll be next. We looked at each other. Bryson knew we were building a case. And he was getting desperate. Bryson's digital purge went far beyond what we'd initially discovered. Over the next 2 days, we watched him systematically erase his entire digital footprint. Email servers suddenly needed emergency maintenance. Backup systems experienced technical failures. Security footage from the executive floor became mysteriously corrupted. But Tariq had been smarter than Bryson realized. He'd built shadow systems that mirrored everything, invisible backups that ran parallel to the official servers, capturing data before it could be deleted. While Bryson thought he was erasing evidence, we were watching him create new evidence of obstruction. He's panicking, Tariq said, monitoring his laptop as another deletion command went through. Look at this. He's wiping financial records going back 3 years, not just recent stuff. He's trying to erase everything, which means he knows we're onto something bigger than just your situation. Jalen pulled up spreadsheets on his tablet. If he's deleting 3 years of records, that means the fraud goes back at least that far. Maybe longer. We're not looking at a recent scheme. This is systematic, long-term embezzlement. We spent 72 hours reconstructing everything Bryson tried to destroy. Every deleted email, every erased log, every modified file. Tariq's hidden mirrors captured it all. By Thursday evening, we had a complete picture of Bryson's criminal enterprise. Shell companies created shortly after he became CEO. Payments disguised as legitimate business expenses. Revenue recognition fraud that inflated the company's value before major investment rounds. He'd stolen millions, and he'd nearly gotten away with it. Then Tariq grinned, pulling up one final file. He just made a huge mistake. In his panic, he forgot about the executive email archive. The one that automatically forwards copies of all C-suite emails to the board's secure server for governance purposes. Can we access that? Yes. We don't have to. The board already has it. They just don't know what they're looking at. Yet. We divided the work. Jalen focused on the financial evidence, organizing every fraudulent transaction into categories. Shell company payments, fake vendor invoices, revenue manipulation, inventory fraud. Tariq compiled the digital evidence. Access logs, deleted files, system manipulations, the data purge attempts. I took on the hardest part, building the narrative. How Bryson had systematically stolen from the company, how he'd covered his tracks, how he'd tried to frame me when I refused to become his scapegoat. I wrote it like a story because that's what it was. A story of corruption, coercion, and one person's desperate attempt to protect herself. By Sunday night we had assembled something devastating. A complete dossier of Bryson Vale's crimes, backed by irrefutable evidence. Bank records, forged documents, audio recordings, digital forensics. Everything an investigator would need to build a federal case. But we still had a problem. We were 3 employees against a CEO with powerful connections. We needed someone inside the company's leadership who could actually do something with this evidence. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Ilara Whitmore. A woman's voice, professional and measured. This is Celine Hart. I'm the chair of the company's board of directors. I understand you might have information relevant to some concerns I've been investigating regarding our CEO. Would you be willing to meet? My hands started shaking. Celine Hart. I'd seen her name on quarterly reports, on press releases, on the board member roster. She was the ultimate insider, a tech industry veteran who'd served on boards for 20 years. How did you get my number? Yes. Jalen Rodriguez from Internal Audit contacted me. Apparently, he's been trying to report irregularities for months, and I never received any of his communications. That concerned me greatly. Do you have evidence, Miss Whitmore? Or just suspicions? We met at a coffee shop 2 miles from the office, neutral territory where corporate surveillance cameras couldn't reach. Celine Hart was in her early 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She arrived alone, ordered black coffee, and sat across from me with the focused intensity of someone used to making billion-dollar decisions. Tell me everything, she said simply. I told her about the locked office, the fraudulent contract, the threats. I explained the forgery, the sabotage, the systematic framing. I described the shell companies, the deleted evidence, the years of embezzlement we'd uncovered. Celine listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, she sat back, her coffee untouched and cooling. I've suspected something was wrong for over a year, she admitted. Financial reports that didn't match operational realities. Vendor relationships that made no business sense. Staff turnover in critical positions that seemed orchestrated. But Bryson always had explanations, always had documentation, always made me feel like I was seeing shadows where none existed. He's very good at controlling narratives, I said. Not anymore. Celine pulled out her phone. You mentioned audio recordings. I need to hear them. I played the recording from that first meeting. Bryson's voice filled the quiet coffee shop. Smooth, threatening, explicit. Sign it, Ilara, or your career ends here. My voice, frightened but defiant. This isn't legal. His response, cold and calculated. Then I'll destroy you first. When it ended, Celine's jaw was tight. That's explicit coercion and acknowledgement of criminal activity. Combined with the financial evidence you've described, this is more than sufficient for immediate action. What kind of action? She looked at me with something like respect. The board meets in 5 days. Emergency session to discuss quarterly results. I'm going to add a special agenda item. Allegations of executive misconduct requiring immediate investigation. Prepare everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. You're going to present it all. The next morning, Bryson launched his counterattack. It started with an email to the entire company, a message about maintaining professional standards and addressing malicious rumors that were damaging company morale and reputation. Then the rumors started. Whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. Knowing looks from colleagues. Someone started a story that I'd been stealing from the company and was now trying to frame Bryson to cover my tracks. Another rumor claimed I'd been fired for incompetence and was just bitter. By Tuesday, the rumors had become bolder. I received an anonymous email with evidence that I'd been in contact with competitors, supposedly selling company secrets. The evidence was fabricated, obvious to anyone who looked closely, but most people didn't look closely. They just believed what they heard. Wednesday morning, I found a formal reprimand in my inbox. Supposedly, I'd violated company policy by accessing confidential files without authorization. The IT logs they cited were fake. Tarek confirmed they'd been manufactured using admin privileges, but they looked official. Thursday, Patricia from HR called me into her office. She handed me a termination letter, her expression apologetic but firm. Effective immediately, Ilara. Multiple policy violations, insubordination, and conduct unbecoming of a company employee. Security will escort you out. I read the letter calmly, then looked up at Patricia. Can I have a copy of this? She seemed surprised. Of course. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my bag. Thank you, Patricia. You've been very helpful. As security walked me to my desk to collect my things, I saw Bryson watching from his office window. He was smiling. He thought he'd won. He had no idea I'd just gotten the final piece of evidence I needed. I went home, closed my laptop, and smiled. Let Bryson think he'd beaten me. Let him believe his victory was complete. While he celebrated, I was assembling something he couldn't defend against. The complete, irrefutable truth. Tariq called that evening. He's telling everyone you left voluntarily. Says you resigned under pressure because you knew you'd be caught for the fraud. He's already promoting someone to replace you. Good, I said. Let him think it's over. Jalen emailed me an updated financial analysis. He'd found 3 more shell companies, 2 more years of fraud, evidence that Bryson had been embezzling since his 2nd month as CEO. The total theft exceeded $12 million. Friday afternoon, Celine Hart confirmed everything. The board meets Monday at 9. You'll have 30 minutes to present. Bryson will be there, which means he'll try to discredit you before you even begin. Be prepared for him to have his own counterattack ready. I spent the weekend organizing everything into a presentation. Not a chaotic data dump, but a clear narrative with irrefutable evidence at every step. I started with the contract, the moment Bryson revealed his intentions. Then I showed the forgery, proving he'd framed me. Then the shell companies, the stolen millions, the systematic fraud. Each accusation was backed by documents, by recordings, by digital forensics that Tariq had certified. Each piece of evidence led inevitably to the next, building a case that even expensive lawyers couldn't dismiss. Sunday night I got a message from an unknown number. Bryson is preparing a counterattack. He has doctored videos showing you accessing confidential files. He's going to accuse you of blackmail and fraud. Be ready. I forwarded it to Tariq. 10 minutes later he responded. Already found the files he's planning to use. Every single one is fake. I can prove it. Monday morning arrived with terrible weather. Dark clouds and rain that matched my mood perfectly. I dressed carefully in my most professional suit, the one I'd worn to my first interview with this company 3 years ago. It felt appropriate somehow. Coming full circle. The boardroom was on the executive floor, a place I'd only been once before, during my initial orientation. 20 chairs surrounded a massive conference table. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Everything about the room screamed power, money, control. I arrived early with Jalen and Tariq. We set up a laptop, connected it to the presentation system, loaded all our evidence files. Celine arrived next, greeting me with a firm handshake and a small, encouraging smile. Then the other board members began filing in. 7 people total, each one worth millions. Each one used to making decisions that affected thousands of employees. They took their seats, opened their tablets, prepared for what they thought would be a routine quarterly meeting. Bryson arrived last, walking in with the confidence of someone who owned the room. He wore his most expensive suit, his Harvard MBA ring catching the light. He saw me and his expression barely changed, just a flicker of surprise, quickly suppressed. He took his seat at the head of the table. Celine, I wasn't aware we were having visitors today. Special circumstances, Celine replied coolly. Allegations have been raised that require immediate board attention. Mr. Vale, I'd like to begin with your perspective on recent events in the finance department. Bryson leaned back, completely composed. Of course. Happy to address any concerns. Bryson opened with a performance that would have been impressive if I didn't know the truth. He painted me as a troubled employee who'd been struggling for months, making errors, missing deadlines, becoming increasingly erratic under normal performance pressure. Unfortunately, he said with perfect false sympathy, Miss Whitmore became defensive when we tried to address these issues. Rather than accept responsibility, she began making wild accusations about financial impropriety. When we had no choice but to terminate her employment, she apparently decided to retaliate with these fabricated claims. He pulled out a tablet and brought up what looked like security footage. These videos show Miss Whitmore accessing confidential files after hours, files she had no authorization to view. We believe she was gathering proprietary information, possibly to sell to competitors or use for blackmail. The videos played. I watched myself on screen, apparently sneaking through the office at night, hacking into secure systems, copying files onto external drives. It looked damning. We also discovered, Bryson continued, that Miss Whitmore had been in regular contact with several of our competitors. Email evidence suggests she was selling strategic information for personal gain. He showed screenshots of emails supposedly from my account, discussing confidential projects with people at rival companies. More fabricated evidence, more manufactured guilt. Given these circumstances, Bryson concluded, I believe Miss Whitmore's accusations are nothing more than a desperate attempt to deflect attention from her own misconduct. I recommend we refer this matter to law enforcement for investigation of corporate espionage and fraud. Celine turned to me. Your turn, Miss Whitmore. Show us everything. I stood and connected my laptop to the presentation system. Mr. Vale is correct that I accessed confidential files. What he didn't mention is that those files contained evidence of his own criminal activity, and I accessed them because he was actively trying to frame me for his crimes. I pulled up the first piece of evidence, the audio recording. This is from 2 weeks ago, recorded in Mr. Vale's office. Bryson's voice filled the boardroom. Clear, unmistakable, threatening. Sign it, Ilara, or your career ends here. The entire 15-minute conversation played out, each word more damning than the last. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Bryson's confident expression began to crack. That recording, I continued, documents Mr. Vale attempting to coerce me into signing a fraudulent contract that would make me personally responsible for years of financial crimes he committed. I displayed the contract on the screen, the original version with no signature, the one Bryson had tried to force on me. Then I showed the forged version, with my signature mysteriously appearing. Mr. Vale created 2 versions of this document, one to coerce me with, one to frame me with. When I refused to sign, he forged my signature to make it appear I'd agreed. Tarek stepped forward. I can verify the forgery. The metadata on the signed version shows it was created from Mr. Vale's office computer, using administrative credentials only he has access to. The digital signature was copied from Miss Whitmore's legitimate company documents and pasted onto the fraudulent contract. Jalen took over next, pulling up financial records. Over the past 3 years, Mr. Vale has systematically embezzled over $12 million through shell companies and fake vendor contracts. These companies, Cascade Holdings, Pinnacle Consulting, and 5 others, are all registered to Mr. Vale's personal associates and family members. He walked through each fraudulent transaction, showing wire transfers, fake invoices, altered accounting records. The board members leaned forward, studying the evidence with growing alarm. Every attempt I made to report these irregularities, Jalen continued, was buried. My reports to the audit committee disappeared. My concerns were dismissed. I now believe Mr. Vale was intercepting my communications and preventing them from reaching the board. Celine nodded grimly. I never received any of Mr. Rodriguez's reports, despite his claims he sent them directly to me. Bryson finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. These are legitimate business expenses, properly documented and approved through normal channels. You're taking accounting entries out of context to build a conspiracy theory. Then explain this, I said, pulling up the deleted files Tarek had recovered. These are system logs showing you accessing my work files at 2 in the morning, modifying my reports to insert calculation errors, then covering your tracks by deleting the access records. Except IT maintains hidden backups of everything. I showed the access logs, the before and after versions of my reports, the deletion commands Bryson had issued. You sabotaged my work to make me appear incompetent, building a case to fire me before I could discover your fraud. And these videos you showed earlier? Tarek pulled up technical analysis. Every single one is fabricated. The metadata shows they were created last week using editing software. I can prove none of these events actually occurred. The room fell silent as the evidence piled up, piece after piece, until the weight of it became undeniable. Bryson sat frozen, his confident mask completely shattered. The emails to competitors. Continued. Also fabricated. Created using Mr. Vale's administrative access to forge messages from my account. The timestamps don't match my actual computer activity logs. I was home with my sister during several of these supposed communications. I pulled up my final piece of evidence. Phone records, location data, witness statements. Everything proving I was nowhere near my computer when these fake emails were supposedly sent. Every accusation Mr. Vale made against me is a lie. Every piece of evidence he presented is manufactured. He tried to frame me because I refused to take responsibility for his crimes. Then I played the recording one more time. That crucial moment when Bryson had revealed everything. Then I'll destroy you first. The words hung in the air. Impossible to misinterpret. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a disagreement about accounting practices. This was a confession, captured in his own voice, admitting he intended to destroy me for refusing to participate in his fraud. Bryson suddenly lunged across the table, reaching for my laptop. That recording is illegal. You can't use illegally obtained evidence. Security stepped forward immediately, blocking his path. His desperate grab for the evidence only made him look more guilty. The board members stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Celine's voice cut through the chaos, cold as ice. Mr. Vale, you are suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. Bryson looked around the table, searching for allies and finding none. You're making a mistake. I built this company. I made us profitable. You can't do this. We can, Celine said firmly. And we are. 2 security officers appeared at the boardroom door. Bryson stood slowly, his face red with rage and humiliation. He pointed at me, his hand shaking. You have no idea what you've done. I'll bury you. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Escort him out, Celine ordered. Now. They walked him to the door, one on each side. Bryson kept shouting threats and accusations until they led him into the hallway and the heavy door closed, muffling his voice. The silence that followed was profound. 7 board members sat processing what they just witnessed. Celine finally spoke, her voice steady despite the shock in her eyes. Miss Whitmore, on behalf of the board, I apologize for what you've endured. We failed in our oversight responsibilities, and you paid the price for our negligence. What happens now? Yes. We're launching a complete forensic investigation into all of Mr. Vale's activities during his tenure. We'll cooperate fully with law enforcement. Based on the evidence you've presented, criminal charges are inevitable. She glanced at the other board members. We also need to ensure this never happens again. Our internal controls clearly failed. Another board member, a silver-haired man named Theodore, spoke up. Miss Whitmore, you demonstrated remarkable courage and integrity throughout this ordeal. That level of character is exactly what this company needs in its leadership. Celine reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. She slid it across the polished table toward me. Before we adjourn, there's one more matter to address. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside were several documents, official and embossed with the company seal. The first was a formal apology, signed by all 7 board members, acknowledging the injustice I'd suffered and taking responsibility for the failures of corporate oversight that had allowed Bryson's crimes to continue unchecked. The second document reinstated my employment, effective immediately, with full back pay and benefits for the week I'd been wrongfully terminated. The third made my breath catch. It was an offer letter for a newly created position, Director of Financial Integrity and Ethics Oversight. The salary was triple what I'd been making. The responsibilities included rebuilding the company's internal controls, implementing new fraud prevention systems, and serving as a direct liaison to the board on all financial matters. We need someone who has proven they'll do the right thing even when it's difficult, Celine explained. Someone who can't be bullied or bought. Someone who understands how these systems fail and how to fix them. You've demonstrated all of that. The fourth document was the most surprising. An authorization for me to lead a complete overhaul of the company's ethics and compliance framework. I would have the authority to implement new policies, hire staff, and report directly to the board, bypassing the CEO position entirely. You'll essentially be building a new department from scratch, Theodore added. Creating the safeguards that should have existed all along. Think of it as your chance to ensure no one else goes through what you experienced. I looked up at them, these powerful people who were offering me not just justice, but the opportunity to create real change. I accept. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I glanced at the screen and felt a chill. It was Bryson calling from a number I didn't recognize. The call went to voicemail. I stood outside the boardroom an hour later, having finalized my new employment contract and discussed the framework for the ethics overhaul. My phone buzzed again. A new voicemail notification. Played it. Bryson's voice came through, stripped of its usual confidence and control. Now he just sounded desperate, almost pathetic. Ilara, it's me. Listen, we need to talk. This has all gotten out of hand. I made some mistakes, but we can fix this. You help me, I help you. Tell the board you misunderstood, that the evidence was taken out of context. You owe me that much. I gave you opportunities. I promoted you. I trusted you. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, facing criminal charges and professional ruin, he thought he could manipulate me. He actually believed I owed him something. The message continued. If you don't help me, if you let this investigation continue, it'll destroy you too. They'll dig into everything. Your work history, your personal life, everything. Is that what you want? Call me back. We'll figure this out together. The message ended. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then I deleted the voicemail without responding. He wasn't worth another second of my time, another moment of my energy. He tried to destroy my career, my reputation, my future. And I'd won. Not by playing his games, but by refusing to play at all. I walked through the building toward my new office. The one being prepared on the executive floor, the one with windows overlooking the city. As I passed Bryson's former office, I saw workers already boxing up his belongings. His name was being removed from the door. Tomorrow my name would be there instead. 3 months later, I stood in that same office, now fully mine, and looked out over the company I was helping to rebuild. The ethics department I'd created was 15 people strong. We'd implemented new fraud detection systems, revised every financial control, and created clear channels for reporting concerns that couldn't be buried or ignored. Bryson was awaiting trial on federal charges. The investigation had uncovered even more fraud than we'd initially found. Over $18 million stolen across 4 years. His lawyers were negotiating a plea deal, but prosecutors weren't interested in leniency. My phone sat on the desk silent. He tried calling 3 more times in those first weeks, each message more desperate than the last. I never responded. Eventually the calls stopped. I learned something important through all of this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone tries to destroy you isn't fighting back with the same weapons they use. It's building something stronger from their ruins. Something better, more honest, more just. Bryson thought he could force me to be complicit in his crimes. Instead, I became the person who ensured those crimes would never happen again. He tried to erase me from the story, but I ended up writing the final chapter. And the ending. My name on the door where his used to be. My systems protecting the place he'd tried to corrupt. My voice ensuring the truth couldn't be silenced. He'd asked what happens to employees who forget their place. I showed him exactly what happens to CEOs who forget theirs.